We've come to Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, one of the most famous and spectacular stately homes and gardens in Britain. And we've come to see an exhibition by the modern artist Anthony Caro. It's the first time they've had a modern artist showing by himself here. We're going to take a tour.
The exhibition began at the invitation of the Duke of Devonshire, and he approached us with the desire to do the first solo show of a sculptor's work here at Chatsworth.
This exhibition, I mean, it couldn't have a more extraordinary setting. I mean, this is a fountain created by Joseph Paxton in the 19th century, I believe.
Yes.
And a place where you're used to seeing classical sculpture. Why did you think that Caro would particularly fit into that context, or clash with that context, or collide with it in an interesting way?
I think he seemed a logical sort of choice in many ways. In fact, I think partly it's the formality of the gardens we felt gave the setting quite a sort of room-like quality, which we felt would suit his work. Historically, there is a Caro in the collection, so he seemed logical in that respect, but also because of his use of steel, and we're very close to Sheffield and what was the home of the British steel industry, it seemed to make logical sense. This was first shown at the Henry Moore Foundation studio in Halifax, inside. So it was made as an indoor work in a former carpet warehouse. And I think it's probably Caro at his most architectural. So it's the sort of late 90s, early 2000s when he is very much looking at this sort of role between architecture and sculpture. And for the exhibition, it felt the right sort of statement, like a gate. So it's like the gateway that opens the exhibition against this sort of spectacular backdrop of the newly refurbished house.
So this is a much earlier work by Caro.
It's from the Flat series, which Caro made in Toronto. He was invited to work ostensibly in a steel yard called York Steel, and he's able to work with the resources there, the material on a size that he hasn't really been able to use before.
He really was doing a very pure and very bold kind of abstract sculpture that really has no truck with representation. The figure, I mean, Henry Moore was still going pretty big at the time in British art, so this is utterly different. It's not like seeing a statue of Apollo in a classical garden. You know it's Apollo, there's a story behind it. There's never going to be a narrative that makes sense of this. There's never going to be a simple way to understand it.
This funnel shape always makes me think of something like an American kind of grain hopper or something like that.
But maybe also older of millstones here as well.
Yeah.
Old, very ancient millstones, but made in steel. And again, has this been rusted and painted?
Yes, varnished to sort of retain that particular sort of colour and texture. It is interesting because he did begin as a figurative sculptor. The great innovation, again in the 60s, as well as the materials he was using, was to bring things down off the pedestal, off the plinth, so that there is more of an immediate relationship between the viewer and the work. This piece, which is called Egyptian, it's one of the works in the exhibition that's so different from every different angle that you approach it from. So from the front, it looks like a doorway into a tomb or a temple. But then from the back and from the sides, it has this wonderful kind of blocky kind of construction that Caro's created.
There's a sense in which it's timely, this exhibition, because there seems to be a sort of mood in contemporary art and in younger art of people actually quite liking sculpture after all. not being obsessed with saying it's an object, but be quite happy to make a sculpture. This is a fantastic view. I mean, this is a fantastic work, I think, and just coming across it and seeing it from across the lake, that bold orange paint. Obviously, it's very different. It's very different from the other. So the other works of their varnished rust, and so they kind of fit in, and they're quite almost natural looking. This is very unnatural looking. Extremely unnatural looking, there's no question. This is a piece of modern art.
When you look at the bolts, when you look at the holes, there's this kind of wonderful kind of rudimentary nature to it. And I think it's very much sort of Caro finding his way, having alighted on this new idea, this new way of expressing himself, and trying to work out what form that should take, and physically and practically how to do it.
The way that girder comes down, you just feel it's part of a great building. You feel it's part of a skyscraper.
Yeah.
You feel this is. It's not, you almost feel the weight of the skyscraper above it, and the soaring and height of it. It's completely wacky wild setting for it, because you know this is something you'd expect to see in a big hangar or somewhere, or
Yes,
kind of, you know,
yeah.
warehouse kind of setting, and then seeing it in this beautifully crafted Victorian woodland. I think it's dazzling, actually.